You're good.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order then. And of course, the first item is the approval of the agenda and order of business. And I have a couple. Jennifer, I think you wanted to add the African Heritage Month.
Yes, please. 9.5.
Okay. And Andre, you wanted to add an item to the in-camera session, joint services, building fire inspection. You're muted, but I see.
Yes, please.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? Tina?
Yes, under committee reports, I would like to add Social Public Library. As well, Councillor Asif and I would probably like to add the newly formed MODC Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee.
Okay. Anything else?
Motion
Somebody
to
prepared-
approve agenda as amended.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. Public input, Jennifer, I'm not sure if we have any or not.
No, we didn't receive any.
Okay. So we're on to the minutes of the previous meeting, canceled January the 14th. Any errors or omissions?
Alan?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Are we on the minutes?
Yes, January 14th canceled.
I have a question.
Okay.
Floyd, don't take this the wrong way. On page 6 and page 8, there's a couple of comments that said about the Hubbard Sailing Club where it says council did want to support the event. Just a question of how council approaches it. I think we certainly want to look at it. I don't know that we made a commitment to support the event. I'm just wondering if that's overstated. I don't. Page 6 and 8 makes those references to. I'm not sure how precise you want to be in the minutes, Ward. I don't want to be too picky, but
Well, I think that the general consensus, I mean, we didn't vote, but the general consensus was that if there was a way in which we could support them that made some sense, that we would be interested in doing so, I guess. Or at least that's the way I understood it.
I didn't sense there was a consensus on that. I think we certainly want to look at it.
Well, I suppose we could amend them to say that council's prepared to look at ways
Yeah,
in which.
I think we are. I think we want to look at it with an open mind, and there was some good discussion, but it seems to be.
Okay, we can amend the minutes to reflect that better. Anything else in the minutes? Not a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second? Seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we're on to 5.1, Committee of the Whole. And I believe there are some motions there that require approval of council. Anybody prepared to move that we approve the recommendations?
So moved.
Seconder?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we're on to Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program then. Councillor Connors?
Thank you. As usual, the monthly activity report for the month of December, in this case, was sent out with the package, council package. So if there are any questions, I'd attempt an answer. Maybe have to go back to you, but I'd see. We met as recently as yesterday afternoon, and a big item on the discussion yesterday was around money. So budget, deep into, further into the budget discussions that we started last fall. Just certainly looking ahead at the great work that we continue to do as a group, as a staff, and where we're going to go in the future. Because again, we've established a really great great work by the staff, if you will. Working now with the province, the chair and vice chair, past chair, working with the province or the department within the province to secure definitive information, definitive answers around, budget stuff. Because we're at the tail end of not a 3-year contract, but a 3-year kind of bit of a commitment. So we're looking ahead to that. So money is what we're talking about.
So it makes the world go round.
Yep.
Seems like it anyway.
Yeah.
Anyone, any questions, comments? If not, okay, thank you, Tina. So we're on to 5.3, Committee of the Whole, just approval of the minutes from December 21st or December 2nd, I mean.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So then, Tina, I guess we would do the South Shore Library, and you wanted that in? Yeah.
Thank you. So we met as recently as last night as a committee. Just a couple of things that I'm going to mention. You may have noticed that the new bus has not been on the road for the last little tiny bit. Everything's good. Basically, there have been some deficiencies identified really since delivery, if you will. So over the course of newly minted bus being on the road, we kind of fine-tuned those issues a little bit, we being the staff on the bus, if you will. And pretty much all of the concerns are going to fall under warranty, but nothing big, nothing out of the question, just kind of fine-tuning a few things. So good thing we've got the old gal still, or the old one still around, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second thing is we continue to work as a staff, mostly staff, a little bit bored, on the equity, diversity, and inclusion plan that the library, again, has had underway for a while. One thing that I'm going to note within the action plan, and it's still quasi-draft action plan, but one thing that is for sure is that there is a suggested reading list within that, again, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So you can think about that, but it's a list of, I don't know, maybe a dozen readings right now, and that will continue to be added to, continue to be built upon, and so on. I indicated to the group that I would like to share that, and of course it's a public document, so it's a public list. Those are books that we now have in our collection, absolutely. So what I'd like to do is I will circulate that through to the municipality, probably not just council, but council and staff. So I'll get it out somehow through someone. I also said that I would share that with Councillor Asif to the newly formed EDI committee of the municipality. So just a suggested reading list. So
okay. Maybe I misunderstood, but was the bookmobile going to be providing rapid test kits or attempting to? Yeah,
we talked about that last evening, and I saw the social media post. So I might get it wrong if I try to speak to it, but I believe they have a supply in right now, and they are going to be available after 3 at 2 of their bricks and mortar locations, Bridgewater and Lunenburg. I think. I hate to say that on live here, but I believe that's what we know for now, Alan. And they also hope to get additional kits, which they will then continue to post on their social media, through social media, and anyone that wants to call, of course, the headquarters there. But they can't commit to that until they receive those in hand, because obviously they learned from previous experience in December when the province put it out that the libraries are going to be distributing, and the South Shore unit didn't have theirs till 3 days later. So.
Okay. I just wanted to know if it was correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, just a comment for Tina and the public that the bookmobiles, my understanding is you can't go on the bus at the moment, that you just can pick up books if you order ahead, or drop off books.
Yeah,
And if they do, they didn't have rapid tests last week, but
No,
when they
no.
do, it would be the same thing. You
Yeah,
can't go
yeah.
on the bus at the moment because of
Yeah.
COVID, just so the public know.
Cool, good. Excellent point. I was remiss in not mentioning that, Sharon, that's perfect. So yes, no, I assume I'll get an appointment time over the next couple of days because a book that I had requested from, Guysborougugh, I think, is in. So it's on hold for me. So it's coming in on Tuesday to New Ross. So I'll find out more about how that works. But you're right. Can't go on the bus. They meet you outside. So, yep.
Okay, thank you. So we're on to the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I know you guys just met this week, so.
Woohoo, Councillor Asif. So we met Tuesday evening and had, it was just a phenomenal, productive, exciting, high-level meeting, really it was. And I know that Tara, Pam, Nadine, Jonathan, Jennifer, we were all there, right? It was good. And we have a high level of citizen, great job nominating committee. We were on that, choosing and identifying the wonderful slate of individuals of interest that came forward that wanted to sit on that committee. We, at this meeting, there was a chair and vice chair nominated and motioned to be in those positions, mover and seconder. We established a regular monthly meeting agreed upon by all, which is very important when you have a new group coming together. We actually established a couple of action items, to-dos that will be happening ASAP with a task list identified of who's going to do what, who's on first, and so on. What do you think, Abdallah? Do you think that's okay? That's sufficient?
I think that, yeah, I think that covers it very well, Tina. It was actually a great meeting. Like for the first meeting, it was, as Tina said, there's a great diversity of people on the committee as well. That and we had great input from the student. Amazing, like the Syrian student that brought some ideas to the table that were, real life lived experiences that I sort of identified with in a certain way, but 50 years ago. But she was just amazing, and brought some things that we just wouldn't have thought of. I think you would agree, Tina. And
Yes,
that's part
our first meeting.
Yeah, first meeting. It was everybody was very well engaged. I'm really glad that this is being done. It's amazing. I'm really excited about the group. We have a great chairman. We nominated. She's hands-on and so yeah, Tina. I think that's all I want to add. Tina, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good to hear.
Yep.
Okay, so public presentations, we have none that I'm aware of. Oh, don't hear anybody telling me different. So we're on to 7.1, which is second and final reading outdoor fire bylaw. So
I can take this one.
Okay.
So council's already given first reading to a previous version of the outdoor burning bylaw. We advertised that in the newsletter, and then when it came back for second reading, council asked for some changes to that. So we made those changes and presented them for first reading. So we've done the required advertising, and so it's in front of you today for second reading and final reading.
does anybody have anything they want to add, or somebody prepared to move we adopt?
No, did we receive any more
Comment?
comments?
I'm
from
not
the-
aware of any more comments having been received, no.
I'll move we adopt this bylaw, please.
Yeah,
We
I'll
have a-
second it.
Discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. 7.2, first notice, adoption of COVID-19 vaccination policy. So everybody's seen it. Are somebody prepared to move that we move it on to second reading, or?
So
Sorry,
moved.
this is first notice.
This is first note.
Yeah, so there was a recommendation from committee of the whole last week to send it to council for first notice. So this is first notice.
Okay.
Second notice will be February 10th at the council meeting.
Okay, so we're referring it for second notice.
No, you're giving it first, you're doing first notice and then it'll go to second on February 10th.
Okay, my agenda says I'm referring it, so that's all I'm going. by.
Okay.
Okay, so we're approving for,
You're
This is
giving
for-
first notice, yeah.
yeah,
So moved.
Derek.
So
So
moved.
second
Second.
discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Okay. 7.3, planning matters prepared by Community Development Recreation, amendments to the Village Chester Secondary Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw law to permit illuminated signage in the highway commercial zone. So I
Right.
think that's Garth.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, council. So I'll walk through the staff report here as we would normally do, and then be happy to take any questions when if there are any. So just as a bit of background on this file, this was initiated by council due to a petition at the request of Councillor Barkhouse. So Councillor Barkhouse presented a petition, and then there was a discussion around the council table, and that's sort of what initiated this file. The direction for staff was to speak with the business owners and then return with a report and draft amendments to consider permitting and regulating illuminated signage. And so that's what we have today. In terms of the properties that would be affected by the draft amendments, it's all properties in the highway commercial zone, and there's a map in the report here that shows those properties. And we can touch on this again, just quickly on sort of public engagement and neighbor notification. In this case, because the change is general in nature and affects the entire zone, there is no specific public mail out that will go out. So we just go through our normal public advertising process through the bulletin, the municipal website, and that kind of thing. So just to jump back into it here. So basically, illuminated signage has become a contentious issue in the village. Prior to 2012, illuminated signs were permitted except within the architectural control area. And that, as I think we probably all have a general sense of, is sort of the core peninsula part of the village, as well as a few other areas. But in 2012, as part of the Highway 3 streetscape plan, that was done. And then many of those recommendations were implemented into the planning strategy that saw the current prohibition on illuminated signs come in at that point, along with a number of other changes. The existing signs at the time were allowed to remain and can be repaired, but they can't be replaced or changed, like the logo can't change or the size can't change, and no new illuminated signs can be put in. And so pretty quickly within a couple of years of those changes coming into effect, staff and council started to hear from the business community about a desire to have illuminated signage of some type. There were a number of reasons for that. Part of it was that many of the businesses that orient along Highway 3 there are corporate franchisees and have sort of standardized logos and signage that they understandably want to use to identify themselves. And then there were also some other sort of more unique arguments made in terms of safety for having employees climbing ladders to do changeable copy signs and that kind of thing. So those were sort of the arguments for allowing illuminated signs. So myself and Aaron, the economic development officer, went around and met with most of the business owners that had signed the petition that was submitted by Councillor Barkhouse, to basically talk to them about this and ask, what difficulties they were having other than the illumination piece itself. And as just a quick reminder too, this report is sort of almost a follow-up to what we did last year when we were talking about the request from Tim Hortons.
Yes.
That initially we had considered a wider set of amendments that would have permitted and regulated illuminated signs. And in the end, both from the Village Planning Advisory Committee and then at Council, there was the decision made to scale those amendments back so that they only dealt with the request from Tim Hortons, which is the drive-through menu board signs. And it
Yeah.
left the larger issue of illuminated signage, to be determined. And in some ways, that puts us in a better position now because we've already dealt with those drive-through menu board signs. And one of the issues that came up at that time was how frequently the image was permitted to change. And
Yeah.
with drive-through menu board signs, the desire was to have them change quite frequently. Every 8 seconds was what we settled on in the end. But there was a concern that if that was applied for illuminated signs elsewhere, that would be far too fast for things to be changing if it was visible from Highway 3 itself. And so because we have those drive-through menu board signs already in place and categorized and defined, what we're looking at now is sort of everything else, and it's signs that are intended to be seen from the highway. And so when we get into the specific regulations, you'll hopefully understand why those are proposed the way that they are. So there are a number of existing illuminated signs, like I said, in the village that are left from before the current prohibition came in. I counted about 9 in total that are within the village boundary. There's a few more that are outside of the village boundary. But all of those signs within the village boundary are in the highway commercial zone. And so that's, I think, a good
That's where people want them. Yeah.
yeah, and it's good for consistency because that's what we're proposing here is only within the highway commercial zone. So there are other properties along Highway 3 that aren't highway commercial, and those would not. So we're clearly saying this is a highway commercial type of signage. Let's see here. To go even further to that, we have in the draft amendments that the signs themselves have to be located within the yard that abuts Highway 3. So if you had a lot that abutted Highway 3 and also abutted a secondary street, the sign has to be basically fronting on Highway 3. So if you think of, you could say Home Hardware might be a good example there. So they have frontage on Old Trunk 3 as well. Their sign would have to be out along the front in Highway 3, which I think in most cases is where businesses were going to want to put it. But we were thinking too, that helps keep it focused very clearly on that Highway 3 corridor and doesn't let it sort of trickle out into other parts of the village.
Yeah.
And I think really what sort of this discussion has highlighted is that the Highway 3 Streetscape Plan, which was a substantial amount of good work done in 2011 and 2012, it's been in place for almost a decade now, and we're at a point where we're, actively working on a village plan review. So I think what this is showing is that the Highway 3 Streetscape Plan probably, and this was part of our intent all along, needs a review and a discussion about how things are working. And it's certainly not to say we need to get rid of all of it, but there may be things with a decade of experience that we see this is working and this isn't, or this needs a tweak or a change. And this could be an example of one of those changes.
Yeah.
So we currently have a definition in the land use bylaw for illuminated signs. We've tweaked that slightly. So it means a sign which emanates light through a transparent or translucent material from a light source inside of the sign. It includes neon lights and digital signs, but it does not include signs that have a floodlight or exterior light projected on them.
Yeah. Lloyd, you have a question?
It's just a question. Yeah. Are the signs located on highway property or the property of the landowner? And if they are on highway property, are they permitted by who?
So I don't know for the existing signs. What I can say is we wouldn't issue development, we would be issuing permits for signs that are on private property. So they're intended to be on private property. Now there is the Highway 3 right of way there. And I think if a sign was located in the Highway 3 right of way, but on private property, you would need approval from Department of Transportation, most likely, to install that structure. So
not only gas, but they have to get that permit too. Yeah.
Right, exactly. They'd need both. They'd need I think it would be the work within the right of way permit or something like that. They're also in the research that I did for this file, they're also that they do have requirements around digital signs. And that's part of this package as well, is that any of these signs would have to receive a permit or approval from Department of Transportation if required before we would issue our development permit.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So a couple of other pieces just to touch on in the amendment package here. So like I said, so signs that have floodlights projected on them, those are not considered to be illuminated signs, not regulated in the same way We have many more signs that are illuminated that way with floodlights, and I think generally there's a good argument to be made there that those signs fit more within that village character than the illuminated signs, like the neon type signs. So we felt that exemption was a good one to make and clarify that, so that floodlights can light up signs outside of the highway commercial zone as they can today. One piece that, I mean, is kind of an interesting one for discussion here. We have proposed an exemption for what we call small open signs. So this is something that we've dealing with at a staff level for a while on an enforcement level. And so it's those small signs that are usually a couple of square feet, and they'll say open, or sometimes they'll list the business hours of operation. They're widely used, and from what I understand, they're relatively cheap to acquire and pretty standardized. And we don't get any complaints about that type of illuminated sign. So it also creates an enforcement issue for staff, because basically if they're unplugged, they're going to comply with our bylaw. But as soon as they're plugged in right now, they don't comply. And so it's just kind of this back and forth. And so what we're proposing here is to allow any business to use one of those signs. There's a size limit. And basically it can't flash or change, but if it's just steady lit up, permit that. So it would be an exemption for that. Yep.
Almost everybody has one in the window of their built store or commercial space.
Exactly. That's what we heard. Was it was a cheap and effective way for stores to, communicate that they're open or what their hours are. And so that it seemed to be reasonable. And it was discussed a little bit at the public information meeting and seemed to receive some positive comments there as well. So just to continue, I guess, and dig into the actual amendments themselves and the changes that were being proposed here. As I mentioned, the signs would only be allowed in the highway commercial zone and only in the yard that abuts Highway 3. Basically in the land use bylaw now, we have several types of sign categories. So we've got a ground or pylon sign, a flat wall sign, and a window sign. So we're proposing that illuminated signs could be any of those type of sign, and they'd have to comply with those regulations as well as the new regulations for illuminated signs. Actually, to Floyd's earlier question here, we have now clarified that illuminated signs in particular would be set back 2 meters from all property lines. So that would ensure that the new signs are absolutely going to be on private property. And that setback works similar to how our setback on eaves works. So it's any part of the sign. It's not the foundation of the sign, but you can't put the sign 2 meters and have it project out over the sidewalk or something like that. Yeah. There is a proposed, this may be one, frankly, this may be one of the most controversial pieces of this. There is a proposed size increase for ground signs. So part of our discussions with the business community, we know that there are a few business owners out there who would like to install new signage quite quickly. In 1 or 2 cases, we've actually had folks try to apply for permits preemptively before they were actually able to. And so given the, the mandate was to work with the business community to come up with amendments that would facilitate what they're looking for, we've proposed this increase to ground signs. There's a couple pieces to it, so I just want to make sure it comes through clearly. So prior to the change, currently ground signs or pylon signs can be 6 square meters in sign area per side. If you have a lot that has more than one business, you can have up to 12 square meters. So you double that basically, but each individual sign can only be 6 square meters in size. So you could basically have 2 6-meter signs. Yeah. What we're proposing is to increase the individual limit from 6 meters to 12 meters squared, but to keep the amount of signage per lot at that same 12 meters square. So what it does, if you're an individual business owner, you're the only one on your lot, it's a straight up increase. You're able to go from 6 meters to 12 meters. But if you're a property that has multiple businesses, what it allows you to do is either put all your signage together onto one larger sign rather than have 2 smaller ones, or you can still have the 2 smaller ones. So I hope that's clear, and I'd be happy to answer questions there, but I just wanted to make that clear. That is definitely a change here. And that size increase is new. That prior to 2012, that the size was not 12 meters squared. So it is just an increase. Yeah. We are also proposing to allow ground signs to go back to the previous height limit before the 2012 amendment. And so that's a change from the current 4 meters in height to 8 meters in height. So one of them is a return to the old, and one is a new expansion.
Yeah.
All right.
Hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, because we had the drive-through menu board signs, and those are allowed to change every 8 seconds, with all of these category signs, ground signs, window signs, wall signs, they are proposed that the image or text displayed has to remain constant for 1 hour. So it's going to be a, every hour
It's not flashing.
It could change, but yeah, definitely not flashing. The only exception for that is signs that display the price of gas, temperature, humidity, or other public information public information. So you can picture sometimes, you might have a bank or something that has a clock out there. Obviously, we have to let that change every minute, or else it's not going to be accurate.
Not much of a clock.
Yeah, exactly. So we're getting there. So there's one piece to this that is proposed as an additional consideration. This was something that staff contemplated and are proposing, but was not something that we discussed with the business community. And so for that reason, we wanted to present it as a separate add-on, because the direction was to meet with the business community and bring back what works for them. And we can't outright say that they would agree with this or not, because frankly, it wasn't discussed with them when we were doing those meetings. So to try to maybe alleviate some of the concerns and soften the change with the increase to size limit, what we have proposed as an option is that if a ground sign is proposed that's larger than 6 meters squared, so that's the current size limit, then the business owner would also have to create what we're calling a landscaped area. And the landscaped area would be equal to 2 times the size of the sign area. So if you had a 12-meter sign, you'd have a 24 square meter landscaped area. The landscaped area be required to have a mix of plantings of shrubs, flowers, and potentially smaller trees. But basically, it couldn't be lawn, and it couldn't just be mulched. It would have to actually have some vegetation there. And the intent would be that would be created right at the base of the sign. But if that was impractical or impossible due to the lot configuration, we would allow the business to create it somewhere else on the lot. In a perfect world, it'll be right at the base of the sign, because the idea is to try to soften and increase the visual appeal of these new signs. So in the proposed amendments, anything to do with the landscaped area, I've just identified as red text. And when we get to the options here, then we've got a separate ask for council to address that as a standalone option. So if the feeling is we don't want to go for that, we'll just pull that out, and that's easy to do. And if we do like it, we'll keep it as is. So the last thing that I want to talk about before I guess we turn it over for questions or discussion here is sort of the public engagement, public information. So we did hold a public information meeting in practice, in our standard practice here. That was on November 24th. At that point, we were allowed to do in-person meetings. We had four members of the public who attended. And we had a good and lengthy discussion. I've highlighted some of the questions and answers here in the report. I'd be happy to touch on any, but I hadn't planned to delve into those specifically. But it was a good back and forth, and some of the things we've talked about today came as a result of some of those discussions. So that was great. We also, in this case, which is outside of our sort of normal public engagement, but it was just purely coincidental and opportune. As council may remember, we conducted a resident survey this summer, and the survey intent was to support the village plan review, and certainly is going to. But given that we have preliminary results from that, and that we had what we felt was such a great response rate of sort of over a third return surveys, I did want to highlight that information. When we drafted the survey, we didn't yet have this file started. So the question, if I'd done it in hindsight, I would have worded the questions differently and probably had a series of questions to really dig into this. But we did have a question related to what we were calling digital signs at the time instead of illuminated signs. And so I thought it was relevant to include that just for reference and potentially for discussion here. So the question was not, do you want illuminated signs on Highway 3? That's the question I would like to be able to ask. But it was basically rate your agreement from 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree, that the current restriction on digital signs in the village maintains the unique Chester look.
Yeah.
So that, when we were writing this survey, we were thinking about architectural controls and a bunch of other things that we're going to talk about for plan review. And so that's the why it was phrased this way. But regardless of that, it still touches on the subject, I would say. And as you can see in the report here, of the 227 responses on that question, 201 respondents selected either 4 or 5. So either agree or strongly agree with maintaining the current prohibition.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, it would have been great had we been able to follow up and say, do you feel differently about illuminated signs in different parts of the village, or, you know, that kind of thing. If we'd proposed the draft amendments, maybe that would have changed things. But so I think that is hopefully a good summary. Yeah. So
it is a good summary.
In terms of the options, and again, happy if there are any questions, but in terms of the options, we'd be seeking potentially 3 decisions. The first would be whether or not to include the landscaped area requirement for those larger ground signs. The second, I guess this would almost replace the first, would be whether to give first reading to the draft amendments. And then third, if we do give draft first reading, we have a proposed date for a public hearing, or we can select another one.
Okay, questions, people? Does anybody have any? Yes.
Just a brief one. To increase that size to 8 meters high for the sign, if you're doing a 12-meter sign, can you give me an example? Is that like a home hardware sign? Is that 24 feet?
Yeah, the home hardware sign is very close to that height limit. I'm not within a couple of feet of it. It might be a couple feet short, but 8 meters is roughly going to be roughly 24 feet, and that sign is in that range. Yes.
So is that sign 12 meters or it's smaller?
It would not be 12 meters because the current and previous size limit had been the 6 square meters. So the height is a good example, but the size is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly if that sign is the full 6 meters squared. Like I'm not sure on that, but yes, it would. 12 meters will be bigger than what's there now. Yes.
Yes, Andre?
I can't remember the request for the height and size that's being proposed. Did that come from I'm trying to refresh my memory. Did that come from a previous meeting, that ask, or is that a suggestion of staff?
So there's a few things there. So like I said, we've actually had a development permit application for some signage, and I can't speak to that because it's not public. But I would say between the applications that have been received and the discussions we had with the business community, which was the initial direction, was to go out and speak with the business community and find out what regulations aren't working for them. That was basically, that's it. So what I would say is, if we go and maintain the current size limit, we're most likely going to be immediately faced with a request to increase the size limit, because there's signage out there that is looking to be installed that is larger than what we allow. That doesn't mean we can't hold the line. We absolutely can, but that's why there's no, basically what staff are trying to do here is reflect what the direction was, which was to work with the business community for what will work for them. So, yeah.
I agree. As a follow-up, I agree with, we have to try to support our businesses and try to come up with something that's a little more workable, because I think we are too restrictive now. I am a little concerned because, though, on the other side of this, because 8 meters, 20, which is actually a little more than 26 feet, that's pretty tall.
Yeah.
So, maybe I don't know. I mean, council may want to consider if that's an appropriate height. Even I like your suggestion of trying to soften the appearance with some landscape features or whatever. Maybe we could insist that they clad their poles with wood or rope or something like that to make it feel like something more in keeping with our Chester look. I get all that. That makes sense. But 26 feet would actually dwarf almost any planting that I think that we would put there. I mean, it's a long ways up. So, you know, I think this council should really think hard about whether 26 feet up in the air is appropriate for our village. You know, I want to support them. I think this is good, and I'm glad we're having this discussion, but we really have to get a sense of it's hard to imagine. Like if you look in an average room and you look at the top of your ceiling, that's 8 feet. So more than 3 times that height. That's what we're talking about. So just so council's aware and has a feeling for what that is. It's important, I think. This is a big decision.
Yeah. What's the current height?
The current is 4 meters, and that came in 2012. So prior to 2012, it was 8 meters, and in 2012, it got basically halved to the 4 meters that it is currently.
And we're suggesting now.
What's in the proposed amendments is to go back to the 8, but we could certainly say 6, or pick somewhere in between. That's absolutely would be an option too.
Yeah. Well, it seemed to, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think a compromise might possibly be in order, and 6 would be, it would give them more than they have now.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear from Derek, and because what he thinks about this. I know he's sort of like kind of getting hit sideways here because it's new, but he's a longtime resident of Chester, obviously, so it'd be interesting to hear his perspectives.
Yeah, I think 26 feet is a little much. The 6 meters might be a little much as well. What's the downside of staying with the 4 meters if we're going to allow it?
The downside is that there are some signs out there that have been applied for that would not comply with that, and council will likely be faced with a request to increase the height limit. So as long as they're prepared to say no, then no issue.
Yeah.
As process is concerned, this goes to a public hearing, correct?
Yes, so this potentially would be first reading today. If council gives it first reading, we will pick a date for a public hearing and then go through the 2 weeks of newspaper advertisements, and then have the public hearing. I think the first possible date for a public hearing would be February 17th. Yes, February 17th would be the first possible date, but we could pick one for, beyond that as well.
And after the public hearing, we then have the option of making changes?
Yes.
No, we would want to give first reading to whatever the final set of amendments is. So if we're going to make a change to 6 meters, we would want to make that, or I'm just using that as a placeholder. If we want to make a change to anything, we would want to make that today and then give first reading to that set of amendments.
So
yeah, but if we hold a public hearing, Gareth, and all the public comes out and says, well, 8 meters is not it, we'd be happier with 6. Then we obviously have to change it because it's a significant change, and then go back and do it again.
Sorry, yes, sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah.
I've asked a question.
Derek, are you finished? Just
No.
before
this is important because there's a couple of things in here that we may want to change after we hear from the public. Would mean we have a second public hearing?
Yeah.
Would we have to have a second public hearing then?
we'd have to start.
So
That's significant.
Just for a change from 8 to 6, we have to go back to the whole process again?
I defer to Sam, but yes, that's my understanding.
You're muted, Sam.
Yes, if it's a substantial change, you would have to go back.
Yeah.
Not minor wording changes, whatever, no. But I think it would be part of the process of a public hearing is to hear what the public says, and if it's a substantial change, then you can do it, and you go back and start over again.
You redraft it and start again.
Start again.
And how do we define substantial?
It's a movie, there's no set definition, but generally, if you're changing anything that's considered to be, well, this is obviously a substantial matter because we're debating this. Whether it's 8 or 4, I would say
Okay, Garth, would the 6 meters cover what's in the hopper right now that we're going to come back to council? Sorry, that'd be my last question.
I wouldn't be comfortable answering that off the top of my head for two reasons. One, because the permit application doesn't come to me, so I did have a discussion just to find out what was in there, but I can't say for sure whether 6 meters would. What I can say in a general sense is that we did part of this discussion, and this wasn't about a permit application, this was just with some business owners, was about this sort of corporate signage size. And at first there were some comments made that basically this is the only option I have from the corporation. This is the standard size of sign. And we pushed back on that a little bit and investigated actually with the corporate side ourselves. And what we found was there are options for alternative types of signs and sizes. And even outside of the standard templates, there are places, Lunenburg as a close example, that require signage to change. And those businesses do that in those cases. So anything's possible. Does it increase the cost? Probably. If you have to go outside of the mold and make a sign that's not the standard that they're making for hundreds of other businesses across North America, that may change the cost. But yeah, so sorry, I'm getting off track. So to answer your question, I'm not sure. I think 6 meters would be close, but I can't say for sure. It would be just over or just under. It's going to be one or the other.
Well, I think they could work with it myself. But now Sharon, you've had your hand up a while, and then Floyd.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, do we want to allow signs to be kind of as high as Home Hardware? And Andre, mentioned that. I don't think we necessarily do. And 12-meter sign seems to be an awfully big sign to me. If the one at Home Hardware now is about 8 meters, to me, that's plenty big. I'm just thinking it's huge. And that's all, once we do this, it's in there. I'd be more comfortable with lower height. And really, to me, the 8 meters, 12-meter sign is a lot, in my opinion, but.
Okay, Floyd?
Well, in respect that we did ask staff to work with these people, and they had brought it back. And I know that Garth mentioned in here that if you have one sign, you're allowed, I think it's a 12-meter, but if you have two on one property, or 6. Maybe, and I'm just to make a suggestion, that the 6-meter signs remain the same, 4 meters high, I think it is. But if someone has one sign that is 12 meters, it may make a little more sense to go to 6 meters higher for that one big sign. It's just something I'd throw out there, because I think the big sign makes sense to have a little higher, but that's just me, because we did ask staff to go out, and we know we're going to get kickback from the business community, and that's who we asked staff to work with, who want these changes. So anyway, just a suggestion.
Yeah, so I think if we compromise from 8 meters to 6 meters, we're giving them more than they have now. And I agree with you on the 12 meters if it's one sign. But if you're sticking with the 2 signs on your property, then your remains the same size, to 6. Yeah. Well, I think it's a compromise. It gives them more than they have now, but it doesn't go too far. So what do we want to do, Andre?
It sounds like that's the mood here, and I agree with where council's headed here. I think this is a good report, and I think there's some good suggestions here for sure. Just I think it's our duty. I'm very sympathetic as a business person to the needs of the business community, but at the same time, we also have to protect what is special about Chester. And so we have to find that balance. And I think that maybe, hopefully, it sounds like we're heading towards something that's in the middle. And at least when we propose this and we see both sides of it come out to speak their mind, hopefully they'll be able to see that we're trying to find a solution that'll work for both.
Yeah.
Alan, one more point, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm quite prepared to do 2 public hearings on this if that's what we have to do. I'm quite prepared to listen to the public and make substantial changes if that's what's going to work. I don't think we know. I think we're going to get a lot of kickback on this. You know that.
Yeah.
And we have to be prepared to, compromise, but not totally give up the character that we're trying to protect. So I think as long as we're prepared to have 2 public hearings if necessary, make changes after the public hearing. I would like to go in with the smaller one in this report for the public hearing, the 6-meter one. I think that's where we're compromising down to, isn't it, 6?
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus, that 6 would be trying to help the business community, but also protect the character. And
From my perspective, this is not a show of support. This is, let's go to public hearing and hear what the public have to say.
oh, of course, but it's trying to get us to a place where we have some chance of success at the public hearing.
Absolutely, Al, I agree.
Yeah. So it's, from what I'm getting, Gareth, it would be 6 meters. We want the vegetation.
Okay.
I think piece in there. And if it's 2 signs, they can remain at I forget what it is now. But they can't go as large as 12. Unless it's
Okay.
only,
So we'd be keeping the individual size of each sign at 6?
yes, if there's 2 on the property. But if they're going with 1, it can be the 1 larger one.
Okay, now what about the individual business owner who just won on the property? Currently 6, we had proposed that to go to 12.
Oh, I think we were talking about height in that.
Sorry, we're just
Yeah.
talking about height, we're not changing
Well,
this.
no,
Okay.
height, you had suggested 8 meters in height.
Yes, and so we're gonna change that to 6, and that's.
We're gonna change that to 6. Yes, and if you have 1 sign on the property, it can be as large as what you're suggesting. But if there's gonna be 2, they have to remain at the small size.
Okay, right. I think that's how it's that part is how it's worded now, and we'll make the change on the height.
Yeah, and then we want the vegetation.
But you're going to get the kickback on the 1 sign 12 meter one. That's, even though it's only 1, it's too high. I think
No,
we're going
the
Am I reading
6
it wrong?
meters in height is what we're remaining. It's the size of the sign itself that's the 12.
Yeah, so there's 12. The 12 is
Right.
referring to 12 square meters of area.
Okay, Garth, sorry. I misunderstood.
Yeah. So just a bigger sign, but reduced down to the 6 meters.
I think I need to see what that looks like. Garth, I just want to say again, it's a well-written report. Thank you for that.
Great,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, but what we're looking for is to go to first reading with these amendments, with these changes that we've just suggested.
Agreed.
Okay, somebody prepared to move that we do that
I'll move that we go to public hearing.
with those changes? Yeah.
Those changes.
Second by Andre. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Gareth. Nothing simple about land use stuff.
No problem. Did we want to set a date for the public hearing?
Oh,
now?
yes, we should. Will you be ready by February 17th?
Yep, absolutely. But this is pretty, from the administrator side, pretty minor change to make, just replace that number. So yeah, absolutely. We could do the 17th or at any later date.
How would you,
Everybody-
I just want to know, Garth, would it be an in-person session, you think, or you don't, I mean, who knows?
We have no clue.
Yeah,
I think as of now, it would be a no unless things change.
yeah. I think, Derek, and it's up to you, Derek, but I think you need to make sure that people are very aware and if it's, even if you have to delay it a week or 2 to have most of the public there. Derek, what do you think?
Well, the only date that I don't want it is February 24th because of another event. 17th or the first week of March would work.
Well, first week of March gives people all the time in the world.
I think I would like to move it to the first week of March, if no one has any objection to that.
Okay,
I assume it will be an evening session.
I assume.
Good.
Yeah. So what's the date in March that works?
The March 3rd is the first
March-
Thursday.
March 3rd? We don't have to hold it on a Thursday.
Oh, well, that's true too.
No, actually, I don't like Thursday evenings. I'm usually going to camp on Thursday evenings.
Okay, well, what do we prefer? The first is the Tuesday, the second is the Wednesday.
Somebody want a Tuesday or Wednesday? Which one?
Doesn't
Tuesday.
matter.
Let's do it on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay. Tuesday.
That'll be March 1st.
Okay. So we want to set the public hearing date for March the 1st. Somebody want to move that?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded, discussion, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank you, Garth.
Great, thank you all.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
That's not, Colin, he just had a little thing, but Colin's very private about everything, but he does it, he's shy. And he had a thing on Instagram.
I don't know who I'm listening to now.
Lloyd, you gotta mute your thing. You can hear Elaine.
Okay, district grant request should be a relatively simple one. Let's do that one. 9.1, District 3 grant request. I say it's simple, but our
Alan,
health center. Yeah.
You know nothing is ever simple.
No, I know. I'm scared to even say it will be.
I think the request, I haven't, I want to reach out to a couple of other counselors to see if they'd like to share in this. Because it is the health center, and if we want to defer it till next week, you give me a chance to have that, or if Sharon and Andre want to take a look at now, see if that's something that they would like to share in, or just defer it till so we can discuss it.
Well, there's no problem with deferring it a week. It's just not a big deal.
And I haven't asked them yet, and it's
Yeah.
something. I just had a chance to look at my budget, and it's getting kind of tight. And it is the health center, and I don't know what the norm is on it. So if we could bump it to next week, Al, if that would be okay, and I could speak to Sharon and Andre.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Okay.
Nobody has a problem with that, do they? No. Okay, it's deferred. 9.2, request for decision, community development, recreation, appointment of fire inspector. Chad, I guess that's you.
Good morning, everyone. So this is a relatively straightforward. I think we've been in the habit of once staff are hired by our municipal units in terms of inspection staff, that we do the cross appointing of those inspectors, so that we have the ability to use those staff in the future when needed and when required. And in this case, with Bruce, that we absolutely have intentions of using the services of fire inspector. And so what we would require to do is have council appoint Bruce, and in this case, both in terms of fire inspector and administrator of dangerous and sightly property. So obviously we have a new bylaw officer right now, and so it's unlikely that we would need those services right now, but you never know in the future, if that was ever the case that we needed that service, that we would have that opportunity to use that staff person for that role. And so I guess what we're looking for today is for council to follow through with the appointment of Bruce Parks.
Somebody prepared to move that? Andre? Or you got a question?
I'll just comment before, and I'll move it, but I'll also say that the purpose of this is strictly as a backup, and we're continuing to invest in our own service here, I presume.
That's correct. The one gap that we have in service right now is once our previous inspector left, so Erin Sherman Cole, when she left, she was taking it. She had three responsibilities. She was a building official, she was our fire inspector, and she was our bylaw enforcement officer. And so at this point in time, we have a new part-time building official with Jim Holt, and we have a new bylaw officer with in terms of Brendan. And so we do have a gap right now with fire inspection, and so that we will be, I think, fairly immediately be potentially looking to use Bruce in the interim as part of our shared service agreement for that fire inspection.
And I understand that we're training Brendan to take on the role of fire inspection at this point.
Those are some conversations that we're having right now, yes.
I look forward to hearing how we hope to take that on here and not just rely on outside sources.
Right now we need somebody. So you're moving that we appoint him? We have seconder.
Second that
Discussion. All those in favor?
I just have a word.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
I think Sam had a comment, Alan, I'm not
Oh,
sure.
sorry, Sam.
I'm just gonna ask Chad about appointing him as administrator. Have other areas done the same thing, like have more than one administrator appointed?
As far as I'm aware, I believe that same request was made to the town of Mahone Bay. So as far as I know, that yes, that is what was being asked of the different municipal units.
Okay. Hey, people prepared to have a 10-minute break or not? Yeah, okay, let's do that.